Hurricane Center, Miami.
Maximum winds are now up to 70 miles per hour with higher gusts. Some strength that is forecast during the next 24 hours, and Hermine is expected to be near hurricane intensity by Sunday.
There's rough surf, storm surge, coastal flooding, as well as power outages in the wake of Hermine. Aftershocks felt from a strong earthquake that shook central Oklahoma this morning. The magnitude 5.6 quake centered near Pawnee. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake was felt across several surrounding states. Paul Caruso, a geophysicist at the USGS.
Had some felt reports in the Denver area. We've also had many felt reports across Arkansas and Missouri, and even some as far away as Chicago.
A more subdued Donald Trump arrived at Detroit's historic black church, Great Faith International Ministries. Outside,
he's a good man. He's a bigot.
Protesters for and against him, some demanding to see his tax returns. Inside,
come on, if you believe that today.
the church service during the interview by the black pastor to be aired eventually on the minister's cable channel. Trump never asked the crowd what they would have to lose by voting for him, but he did say,
I am here today to listen to your message, and I hope my presence here will also help your voice to reach new audiences in our country.
And nobody booed when Trump closed with scripture from 1 John 4 saying, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. And that's so true, he said. The congregation then gave him a standing ovation. You're listening to ABC News.
Are you paying too much for term life insurance? There's a tremendous price war among the major term life companies, and rates have dropped dramatically in the past few years. For example, for a man age 45 non-tobacco user, it's $1 million of coverage and $75 per month level rate for the next 10 years. Or a man age 50 non-tobacco user can obtain $500,000 of coverage for a monthly premium of only $110 per month, guaranteed not to change for the next 20 years. That's right, level rate guaranteed not to change for the next 20 years. If you're a smoker, we have great rates available for you as well. At Termbusters, we specialize in policies of $500,000 and above. If you're looking for new or replacement term life insurance, call today for a quote at 1-800-862-8376. That's 1-800-862-8376. You're probably paying more than you should. Call Termbusters at 1-800-862-8376 or visit our website at termbusters.net. Remember, 1-800-862-8376. Rates and availability may vary by state. Sample rate quotes based on preferred non-tobacco underwriting. Exam required to qualify.
The 49ers quarterback who refuses to stand during the national anthem has created another issue with the NFL's regular season. It's just around the corner.
I want to help make America better.
But not everyone sees it that way. Colin Kaepernick has cited racial injustice and police brutality among the many reasons for his protest. And now the Union for San Francisco Police, who work 49ers home games, says its members may boycott policing the stadium if the team refuses to discipline Kaepernick for sitting during the national anthem. A letter from the police union tells the 49er organization if they don't stop Kaepernick, they won't work team games at Levi Stadium. Kaepernick has received support from veterans and military members under the hashtag Veterans for Kaepernick. Todd Ant, ABC News.
More on Your Voice, Your Vote. ABC News political analyst Matthew Dowd on why the number of undecided voters could be crucial to the presidential election.
This is an election where we have two candidates that are fundamentally distrusted and disliked by a majority of the country, and we're ultimately going to have to pick. So I would say watch the third parties as we go in the course of this.
Massachusetts highways may soon become havens for monarch butterflies and other declining insect populations. State wildlife and transportation officials say they plan to use a federal grant of more than $21,000 to help plant milkweed and other native plants for pollinating insects alongside some highways and on median strips. Scientists say the monarch butterfly in particular has seen its numbers dwindle in recent years. This is ABC News.
Brought to you by Attorney Tax. If you're in trouble with the IRS and owe at least $10,000 in back taxes, the IRS is now offering a special program called the Fresh Start Initiative, which can offer significantly reduced settlements that can reduce your liability by thousands of dollars. You may qualify for substantial relief and even forgiveness. See if you qualify and get the help you need by calling the Consumer Hotline, 800-535-3787. That's 800-535-3787.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
From the KMET Weather Center for Beaumont in the Pass area this morning, as we kick off the holiday weekend, we have a red flag warning continuing through this evening. We'll have sunny, breezy conditions with a high of 84 with winds to 25 miles an hour. We'll have some patchy fog tonight. The early part of cloudy and windy, a low 55 with wind gusts to 30 miles an hour. For Redlands, we'll have patchy fog this morning. We'll have clearing skies at a high of 84 this afternoon. For Palm Springs, we'll have a sunny day with a high of 98 with a red flag warning in effect. I'm Rod Tanner for Smart Talk 1490 KMET.
Don't miss this month's Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party meeting. Author and Hemet native Kurt Nordahl will be our featured speaker. His book, What Pisses Me Off About the Good Old USA, is a wake-up call for Americans who are sick of political correctness. And Douglas v. Gibbs will continue with our 4th session on our Constitution. That's Thursday, September 8th at 5 p.m. at the Farms House Restaurant in Banning.
The following is a paid program. Views and claims expressed are those of the program producer and are not endorsed by this station. Opinions expressed are not necessarily those of radio station KMET, its management, employees, or affiliates.
Welcome. It's time for Constitutional Radio right here on KMET 1490 AM in the Pass area and online at KMET1490 am.com. And, don't forget, we also have the podcast and we have the phone app. So, darn it, you don't have a signal for the radio show. It's okay. Put it on your phone. You missed the show. Also put it on YouTube a few days after the program. Douglas v. Gibbs. YouTube.com/Douglas v. Gibbs. Last week we had Trevor Loudon, and I tell you what, that was an incredible program. And Satya, she is going to be coming up on this coming Friday. Matter of fact, her September 11 memorial remembrance event there at Linfield Christian School in Temecula. And we've got, a matter of fact, Constitution Association has a table. We're going to be giving her as much support as possible. And speaking of the Constitution Association, for those of you who are listeners live and you follow what we do today at 5 o'clock in Menifee at Myrna's Cafe off of McCall Avenue is the Constitution Association monthly meeting. This week's guest speaker, or this month's guest speaker, his name is Howard Hyde. He was raised in the Bay Area, and he attended UC Berkeley, and his title is Escape from Berkeley. So definitely don't miss it, 5 o'clock this afternoon in Menifee, constitutionassociation.com, constitutionassociation.com. And to all attendees, I'm also going to hand out an Inland Empire Directory of Representatives. In this directory is all of your federal, state, county, and local city representatives. Their addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, websites. So you have no excuse for not being able to get a hold of your local official. All right, now, Alex to my right, Alex Ferguson, always to my right, conservativecannonade.org. Sir, how is your weekend going so far?
Yes, sir. Corporal Ferguson reporting for duty.
Reporting for duty. Well, it's good to see you, as always, Alex, an audience. Welcome to the program. Constitution Radio comes to you each week right here on KMET. We look at the issues through the lens of the United States Constitution, and this week we have another guest. His name is John Cox. California Citizens Legislature.com. He is a Rancho Santa Fe businessman who has personally funded the Citizens Legislature. I remember it used to be called the Neighborhood Legislature a couple of years ago. We'll ask him about that. His basic idea here is that we have legislative districts that represent too many citizens, and so therefore, how can they represent your interests if they can't even get to know you? There's too many people, and big business, big interests get involved, big money, all that. And so his suggestion is, less populated districts. So let's bring him on. John Cox, welcome to the radio program. CACitizenSlegislature.com. It's great to have you on the program. Explain to us, what is a citizens legislature?
Thank you, Doug, and really a pleasure to be with you, and appreciate the opportunity. As you said, the large districts really give the advantage to the cronies and the corrupt, as far as that goes. The funders of the campaigns, and in California, people know who they are. They're the public sector unions. They're the environmental groups that raise and spend money for a living. There's the trial lawyers who are looking for their favored legislation. You know, if you really look at our system and you take a step back and you look at it, Doug, we have a system under which people who want something from government fund and staff the campaigns of the people who make the decisions. To me and to most people, that would be corruption, but it's business as usual in Sacramento, and I think it's about time that we stopped tinkering around the margins and really recognize the reality that the people in Sacramento work for the funders. They don't work for us. And we got to change the system. The structural integrity of it has to be changed so that we at least have a chance to get policies that reflect what the people really want.
Okay, so if the districts are too populated, they're too large, that means you want to reduce the size of districts so that we have representatives representing neighborhoods rather than these big, giant, gerrymandered sections. But doesn't that also increase the number of representatives?
It does. It does. It's a massive increase, and of course people look at it and they go, wow, that's crazy. But it's not. If you think about it, it creates 12,000 districts, but we don't send 12,000.
And you're talking in the state of California. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And then with 38 million people, you got to create a lot of districts if you're going to make them small. But what we do with this structural change is we create 12,000 districts, but those 12,000 people basically through a process district by district select 120 to go to Sacramento. That's the same size as the current legislature. So
Right. Well, yeah, because we got 80 assembly members and 40 senators in the state right now here in California.
Right. So we're not changing that number that goes to Sacramento. The big change here, though, is that the 120 who go to Sacramento are each accountable to 99 others back home who sent them there. And
now these this larger number, is this like a intermediary house or
No. The 12,000 are the legislators, and they get a vote on every piece of legislation, which they of course can do over the internet. Now,
okay, so you're recommending we take advantage of technology. What a concept!
Yes, what a concept in the home of technology, which is California, right?
Right.
And frankly, that's the argument here, and that is that technology.
And I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt, but you had mentioned that people go, "Wow, that's an incredible number," and it kind of sets you back. So my first thought is, do we really want that many bureaucrats in the system, and staffers going to be added and all sorts of stuff?
No. Each of the 12,000 is basically a volunteer. They get $1,000 a year. There's no staff, there's no pension, there's no car, there's no office. They work out of their house. They basically represent, as you said, their neighborhood. And they gather in groups of 100. Essentially what we've provided for, the technical structure here, is that each current large district is subdivided into 100 tiny ones. So, for instance, a district that has 1 million people, a state Senate district, it becomes 100 Senate districts of 10,000 people each. Those 100 people get elected, and after the election, they meet in a local place, that group of 100, and they select from among that 100 people one member of a working group that goes to Sacramento. So each 100 get to select one person who goes to Sacramento to be part of that working group that drafts legislation, that drafts the budget, that works on issues and meets with lobbyists and, frankly, does all the sausage making that the current legislature does. When those 120 in Sacramento actually produce something that they agree on, before it goes to the governor to be signed, it has to go back to the other 11,880 who are still at home, and they get an up or down vote. They don't get the ability to amend it. They don't get the ability to debate the proposal. They just vote up or down if they like it or not. And then if enough, if a majority vote of the neighborhood people approves it, then it goes to the governor for signature.
All right, now, listeners, as you listen to this, and you're listening to Constitutional Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs and Alex Ferguson, as you're listening to John's description, what do you think? Would love to hear from you. 951-922-3532, 951-922-3532. I completely understand the concept. I am a little nervous about the increase of number, even though you have got these different fail-safes in place, so that there's going to be an increased number of bureaucrats, essentially. But that would bring down the cost of running, in the sense that you don't have as large of an area to run in. But even in cities, city council, you only have one city to worry about. In some cases, districts. You're still talking thousands of dollars to run for office, even at a city level. So how do we resolve that?
Most of those cities, Doug, remember, are still 40,000 or 50,000 people. We're making these districts incredibly tiny, 5,000, 10,000 people. That's only a few thousand households. The real benefit of this system is competition, Doug. Think about it now. I don't know if you've ever considered running for the state assembly or the state senate, have you?
Actually, I did an exploratory committee a couple years ago to run for the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives. But I've run for local council. Okay. But go ahead.
But let's face it. You
know what knocked me out of it was the money. I mean, we were looking at and I'm talking congressional seats, so this is an even bigger seat. We were looking at raising about 50,000, and what we really needed to raise was about 500,000 to have a chance to go up against the mega incumbent who's got millions to spend.
Let me give you a slight correction there, Doug. A congressional district has about 700,000 people, but a state senate district in California has 1 million people almost. So state senate districts in California are actually larger than congressional districts. But the point I'm making is that, let's say you don't like what your congressman or your assemblyman or your senator is doing.
Right.
Can you run against them and defeat them? The answer is no. I mean, there's just no realistic way to run in a district that size. You need millions of dollars. You need huge numbers of people, right?
Right.
That won't be the case in these little tiny districts. In these tiny little districts, let's say that your local, rep who, represents your neighborhood, let's say he goes off the deep end and he votes to raise taxes or he votes to do something else that you don't like. You can run against him, and you don't need to raise millions of dollars. You don't need to give up your entire life to do it. All you need to do is get a good pair of shoes and go door to door to your neighbors and say, here, my name is Doug Gibbs. I think that our taxes are already too high. I think that they waste money in Sacramento. I'd like to represent our neighborhood. Please vote for me. And even though the other guy who, went off and raised taxes might have more name recognition, might have more money, whatever he might have, you can compete with them because you can go door to door. That doesn't exist now. These guys are not accountable, which means they live in a position that
now
let
me play devil's advocate here a little bit. But let's say you still have these incumbents, and let's say they do have money. You're knocking on doors is still not going to be able to beat someone who's pumping money, even if it's a small district, into a campaign where they've got a flyer at every house, they've got a sign on every corner, they've got an ad on on the local radio, and you're just knocking on doors. How do you compete with that?
I disagree with you.
You think this will eliminate that?
Well, here. Listen, I can't predict the future, but go and study New Hampshire, which we have as part of this, okay?
Yeah, I was reading. That's the model that you used, and I didn't study it, but you're patterning it after New Hampshire. which and is it New Hampshire where each neighborhood has its own representative? Is that?
Well, basically, because New Hampshire has 1 million people in it, and there's
It's a smaller state, though, of
members, and there's 400 members of their house. So each house member has an average of 2,500 people. But I was going to say, study New Hampshire, because over the last 30, 40 years, there have been instances where somebody in New Hampshire spent $20,000, let's say, in one of these tiny districts to get elected. They never win because the voters sit there and say, what are you doing? You're spending, thousands of dollars for a seat that pays nothing. And the other guy has walked every house and he's appeared at town hall meetings and he seems like a credible guy. Why are you spending so much money? I'm going to go with the guy that's actually, looks earnest and is honest. I'm not going to go with you.
I mean, isn't it still possible, though, even with these larger districts, for someone to have a really good ground game and win? I mean, we saw in, what was it, Virginia, I think it was, Eric Cantor's seat was beaten by a guy who basically had a great ground game. He was a professor, and he only had maybe 100,000 into the campaign against, Eric Cantor's massive money. And he wound up beating him because he had a good ground game. He had a great message. I mean, is it not still possible to knock some of these people out? Of course, in California, that's kind of a difficult question.
It's possible. It's possible, but it's not bloody likely. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Eric Cantor was a special case because, people probably thought he was an incumbent and he was so entrenched they didn't even come out to vote. The turnout was so ridiculously tiny in that primary that, his ground game was able to do it. But, remember, that was not necessarily a general election. I think that was
I remember a couple years ago, this was called neighborhood legislature, and now it's citizens legislature. And I noticed it's a different website than it used to be. And the old website's still essentially up, but have you changed your tactic, or was it that you wanted to rebrand it? What happened?
Yeah, it's basically a new couple of consultants who advised me that neighborhood connotes something a little bit less than expert or something like that, and they thought the citizens legislature, it's the same concept, it's just a different brand.
Right, okay.
But,
you're a Rancho Santa Fe businessman, so you're local. You're down here in San Diego County, right?
I am, but I have no businesses in California. I live there. I have a couple of houses in Southern California. I love the weather.
And you've pumped a good share of your own money into this.
Oh yeah, we spent a couple $1 million already.
Oh really? Yeah, because I was reading back a couple of years ago, it was like $500,000. But you pumped quite a bit of money into it. So that tells me this is something that's so important to you that you're willing to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've done research, we've done focus groups, we've done university symposiums, I hired a bunch of people and we went out around the state. We've probably given 500 speeches to Rotary clubs and other church groups and other groups like that. Oh yeah.
Excuse me,
we're getting the message out.
Yeah, I don't have a couple of $1 million to spend on it, but I came up with a platform, a simple platform, that all legislation should be limited to one subject, same as initiatives are in California. That you wouldn't need a constitutional amendment or anything like that to set that up, because we've been doing it for 100 years in California. And my point is that as long as we have these omnibus bills with 2,000 pages and dozens of items that have to be either passed with the bill or denied by sinking the bill, as long as we have that, we don't know what we're voting for. The legislators are not held accountable, and I think the rest of it is like moving the chairs on the Titanic.
Well, but I would submit to you that really and truly, in order to get the reforms we need, we've got to change the structure. Think about this for a second. California has the highest poverty rate. It has the highest costs in the country. It's the highest cost of living, the highest utility costs, the highest gasoline costs, the highest housing prices.
Taxes.
The most people on welfare. it shouldn't be this way. It's because of a dysfunctional legislature that does things for these special interests and doesn't represent the people. California has tried all kinds of reforms, gentlemen, but those reforms like redistricting and top two, and they're fake reforms because they don't get to what really is motivating
we've got
legislators.
major cities that have really taken control. I mean, look at our senatorial race because of our open primary system now. We've got a Democrat versus a Democrat for a boxer's seat.
Right. And you know, these so-called reforms don't get to the heart of why we don't get the needed changes in California. The reason we don't is because the people who want to protect the status quo spend their money by politicians and stop any kind of reform in its tracks. And that's the problem. And until we address that, we are going to get absolutely no reform anywhere.
All right, we got to go to break, so we're going to have to let you go. But thanks for spending the time with us. It's definitely a fascinating idea. I'm not sure if I'm pro or con on this. It definitely is something to think about, and I urge the listeners to give us feedback, constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com to give us feedback. Or you can call in 951-922-3532, 951-922-3532. Thanks for coming on the program. Real quick, elevator pitch and website.
It's CA citizenslegislature.com, and it makes the district so tiny that you don't need money to run, and that's the only way that we're going to break the hold of the corrupt and the cronies in Sacramento.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, John. It was a pleasure having you on the program. And for you listeners, we'll be right back with, Book of the Week and some interesting news from the week. We'll be right back.
You got a dent in your door, a scratch in your fender, or a scratch in your door and a dent in your fender. If you need auto detailing, if you need fire shooting decals on the side of your car, if you need a rally stripe right down the middle of your hardtop, I don't care what it is. The Patriots at All-Star Collision are the place you want to go. They're the only place to go. 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Web address allstarci.com to see all that they do and what they're all about. Phone number 951-279-9161. All-Star Collision, the kings of wreck and roll.
What's your constitutional IQ? Your quest to learn the Constitution can be fun for the whole family. Learn about the Constitution as you play the Constitution Quest board game. Learn more at constitutionquest.com. The spirit of Paul Revere is alive and well and broadcasting on KMET AM 1490. Constitutionalist Douglas V. Gibbs hosts a roundtable of local citizens through local, state, and national issues every Saturday at 8 a.m. Thomas Jefferson said, "We in America do not have government by the majority. We have government by the majority who participate." So, participate. Listen to Conservative Voice Radio every Saturday at 8 a.m. and join Paul Revere's modern Ride for Liberty. Help me fight the good fight. This radio program is funded by advertising dollars. So, if you are a business, add Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs to your business portfolio. If you are a listener, become a patron of the businesses advertising on this program. Without advertising, your weekend dose of truth ends. With more advertising, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs grows, and we will be on the way to win the battle to restore the Republic. To learn more, email us at constitutionspeaker@yahoo.com or visit douglasvgibbs.com.
Hi, this is Ed Hoffman, President Wholesale Capital Corporation, your direct mortgage lender. Real estate prices are still low, which means now's the time to buy your next home before they go up. Whether it's a home to live in, a vacation house, or an investment property, we can meet your mortgage financing needs to help you realize the next phase of your American dream. At Wholesale Capital Corporation, we make sure you get a loan that you can afford with terms that work for you. Wholesale Capital welcomes FHA buyers, conventional buyers, jumbo loan buyers, and we proudly help the U.S. military veterans take advantage of the zero down payment VA loan program. Nobody treats veterans better than Wholesale Capital Corporation. Seniors, if you're interested in creating an additional stream of income or just making your mortgage payment go away with a reverse mortgage, Wholesale Capital would love to help you. To speak with a loan officer who has your best interests in mind, call Wholesale Capital at 855-640-2020. That's area code 855-640-2020. Wholesale Capital Corporation, where we can close.
And now, back to our program.
Welcome back. Constitution Radio, right here on KMET 1490 AM. And our guest is now not with us anymore, but if you want to call in with the with any comments, questions to us and what we thought or whatsoever, you're welcome to. Now let's go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Alex, who's been doing, let's see, what book are you working on now to tell us about? What is the name of the book?
This is called The War on Cops.
The War on Cops, Heather McDonald.
Heather McDonald. She's become sort of a...
Yeah, it's a rather recent book, so it takes into account Black Lives Matter, all that jazz.
All the hottest newest stuff.
And real quick, before you go through that, story number 4. You've heard about, I want to talk about story number 4 real quick because it kind of ties into what you're doing. Story number 4 is Colin Kaepernick, that quarterback from the 49ers who's been refusing to stand for the national anthem. And I wanted to bring it up because he also, during practice, had these anti-cops socks on of basically pigs with cop hats on them, cartoon characters on his socks. But this morning I came across a story that really made this fascinating. To me, it's been a non-story. I really don't care if the guy's an idiot. I really don't. He's disrespectful, but at the same time, he does have the freedom in this country to, it's like I tell people, the problem is in this country is you do have the right to be stupid, but there's an awful lot of people take advantage of that privilege.
Yeah, but in this case, as I understand it, his teammates wanted to wear some patriotic stickers on their helmet.
Right.
And they were denied that right.
Yeah, the NFL has been totally wrong. Well, so real quick, here's what, before we go to what you're doing here, because it ties in what you're doing here. So the Santa Clara Police has contacted the 49ers football organization by letter, and in the letter it says that the officers won't work at the stadium if this team doesn't take action against Kaepernick over his protest. Local television station KNTV said that about 70 Santa Clara police officers work 8 home games per year. So that's fine. You think we can't protect you or we're a problem? That's okay. Then we just won't work the games. See if you can handle your security now, suckers. I mean, that's essentially the message. So I thought that was a great response from the local police department regarding this. Because what has happened is Kaepernick has fallen for this Black Lives Matter idea that, the cops are oppressive. I was in a discussion on Facebook earlier today. This gentleman was saying, well, blacks have a 2.5 times more chance of being killed by cops. I said, well, yeah, but what you're not taking into account is, number one, most of those cops that kill those blacks are black themselves, number one. And number two, that the crime is higher in black neighborhoods and among blacks. So therefore, they put themselves into that opportunity to be 2 times more likely to be killed. So the problem is not racism or discrimination by the cops. The problem is the culture, the criminal, violent culture that has emerged, and I blame that on liberalism with the welfare state and basically paying minorities to stay poor. I mean, think about it, black voters. Democrats have been in charge of your cities and your inner cities for decades and decades and decades. Has it gotten any better? All right. It's all yours. Tell us about your book. And now that we got an idea of what the cops are saying to the 49ers, now we can find out what you've got to say about the cops and this book.
Well, as usual, the big problem is that the liberals lie. It's just inherent in them. It's what they do.
Right.
And as a consequence, this woman has written this book that is absolutely chock full of facts and figures like the ones you just came up with in such a way that you can answer any debate, contention with this book.
Okay.
Now, what we have is a situation that was created in 1964 when LBJ launched the War on Poverty. since that time, I think there was something like 15%. I don't know what the figures are on that, but it's like 15% people lived in poverty. Today, 15% of people live in poverty, and we spent $22 trillion
So what you're saying is in the war on poverty, the poverty have refused to surrender.
It's had absolutely no effect except that it wasted $22 trillion, most of which was spent by Democrats on themselves. So what I'm saying is that...
Are you saying the war on poverty is a money laundering
not only
operation?
is it a money laundering operation, but you have to remember that in Hillary's America, Dinesh D'Souza goes through the ways that the Democrats have maintained slavery. After the Civil War,
right?
They did Jim Crow, and they had chain gangs, and they had workers for nothing. Same thing.
So now basically the plantation owner has gone from giving them food, clothing, and housing on a plantation to doing it through government.
But the goal is slightly different. We now have illegal aliens working at bottom dollar.
Right.
So we don't need slave workers. Now, when I say we, I'm talking about the Democrats. What the Democrats need is votes. And they have used the war on poverty to destroy the black family.
Well, yeah, because once someone becomes informed, they lose the voter. So they have to keep them down, and
they have to keep them dependent.
Right.
And that means that if the husband, if the guy who should be the husband is out selling crack and shooting it out with the people in the street, it means that the woman is totally dependent. She's married to Uncle Sam, and by God, she's going to vote for him.
Well, she doesn't need the man anyway. Welfare has taught her he's a waste anyway. Welfare will be the father.
Well,
the provider.
It has when the black radicals say that the white man has destroyed the black community, in fact, he's right. But as usual, they got it backwards. It's the Democrats that did it. Now, let me check out.
Well, while you're trying to figure that out, I before my folks, when I was a young man, moved out to the Inland Empire. I grew up in North Long Beach, and it's fascinating because it was like night and day to me, the culture and society and all that. And it goes back to what I was saying about the 2 times as many blacks are killed by cops. Is the culture is actually putting them in the position for that to happen, and then they blame it on discrimination. But what comes to mind as we talk about this is the Hegelian dialectic. And the Hegelian dialectic is essentially this. You create the problem, you find opposition to the problem, and then you create the solution to the problem. So the problem, whether or not it truly exists, the problem that's been created is massive racism in America. Then you create opposition to the problem, Black Lives Matter, and then you come in with a big government solution. It's all by design.
Well, what you're dealing with here is Marxist revolutionaries,
right?
And Obama and Hillary and all of their ilk are Marxist revolutionaries, who their first goal is to destroy the existing political social structure, which they're doing at a rapid clip, then replace it with their own cadres, which means that Obama has, we talk about this Supreme Court nomination being
right.
of ultra concern,
right.
but Obama has been appointing judges unopposed
right.
for almost 8 years. He has packed our courts with these Marxist-Leninist lice.
And we get another one in there like this, and a leftist like Hillary in the White House, and leftist judges dominating the court. Conservatism will be hiding in the closet for the next 100 years.
There won't ever be a comeback. So what I'm saying
Well,
is,
I don't believe in no-win scenarios. I think there could be a comeback, but it won't be during my lifetime, that's for sure.
What I'm saying is that the trick that the liberals are playing, and Heather McDonald is the antidote, is that they take everything on the basis of demographics.
Right.
In other words, if the blacks are 15% of a neighborhood, then they ought to be 15% of the arrests and stops and whatever. And it's ridiculous. She gives figures on how many, and you did just a minute ago, on how many crimes these blacks who have no father in the home, who have no social structure because the neighborhood has been devastated first by the welfare state and then by drugs.
Right.
I notice you don't see Obama going nuts on drugs. You don't see him trying to seal the border to keep the drugs out. Drugs are good. They're revolutionary.
Well, they also keep the population too much in a daze to care about doing anything about what's wrong. And the thing is, you were talking about, diversity and, 15% and all sort of stuff. Well, and their version of diversity is not really diversity. I was talking to, you remember Charles Wiley was on the program a few weeks ago, and I was talking to him, and he says to me that, what's her name? Susan Rice, Obama's U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, chose Florida International University as an example of America's most diverse college. She called it America's most diverse college. According to Charles Wiley, though, it's 60% Hispanic. So 60% Hispanic, that's diverse to the left.
Well, it's what they say that figures don't lie, but liars can figure.
Yeah.
And that's what we get when we deal with these Democrats.
Well, only white Republicans could be racist anyway, right?
Well, take a look at what happened in New York a couple of decades ago. Mayor Rudy Giuliani came in and brought with him the broken window policy, which meant that instead of the police waiting until things were almost a shootout before they would act, he's telling them, if somebody breaks a window, I want them arrested and charged. If somebody is intimidating people with a window washing scam, I want the police to come on them like a ton of bricks. In the first year of that program, crime went down 16%, and then 50%. It was the most spectacularly. And they say, well, what about the rest of the country? They all had no. At that time, the rest of the country, crime was flat. But in New York, it was drastically reduced. Now, you hear all these people talking about Black Lives Matter. If they matter, doesn't it matter that 50% of the homicides are not taking place? They're not being killed like they were. But what happened was that 3 organizations came in and they said, you can't stop these known gangbangers on the street and frisk them. This is a violation of their rights. Now, in the meantime, of course, and I will get into this later in another episode, they're passing laws on the basis of fallacious information. Like here in California, the law says that that half the felonies are now misdemeanors, which means there's no probation officer. There's
nobody.
Well,
all these laws, though, it brings to mind something, because as we move away from the Constitution, what we're seeing is more and more laws needing to be made. Because as we move away from being a virtuous nation and a nation that follows the rule of law in the sense of being virtuous, the statists find the need to create more and more laws to keep everything under control because of how they've indoctrinated the public to react to everything. And so more laws are needed to keep the order.
Well, their lies now include a new term, mass incarceration. Obama on down, they're all talking. Obama talks at the UN about it as if it were true, and it's a dirty lie. They're saying that the reason so many blacks are in prison is because white cops hate black people and they're looking for an excuse to lock them up, and they use the drug laws as that excuse. Now, she goes into all kinds of facts, and like Larry Elder says, facts to a liberal are like kryptonite to Superman. It just drives him crazy. Well,
they just deny them. Deny.
The media doesn't report the hundreds and hundreds of murders in Chicago. All these leftist liberal cities around the United States have these horrible ghettos where a kid doesn't have a chance.
Yeah, and all of these problems are in Democrat-governed areas.
That's what I'm saying, absolutely. So we get what FBI Director James Comey called the Ferguson effect.
The Ferguson effect. Okay.
There are all these different factors going on at once. It's being orchestrated by people like George Soros. That we're letting people out of jail through court decisions that somehow the medical...
It's back to the Hegelian dialectic. It's all by design. I am sick and tired of people saying, well, Obama or the Democrats are so stupid. They're not stupid. Everything's working exactly as planned. Final sentences.
The final sentence is that there's a lot more to say on this, and I think it's worth listening to. Same time, same station next week. See you later, Buckaroos.
Yeah, let's go to break, and when we come back, let's see, we've got SpaceX exploding on the launch pad, taking out a Facebook satellite along with it. We've got globalism on the run. G20 is really nervous about this anti-globalism thing rising up. And critical infrastructure expansion is an excuse for the federal government to take control of elections. Talk about the fox guarding the henhouse. All of that when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
The true patriots of All-Star Collision have been proudly serving the Inland Empire for over 20 years. Built on honesty, integrity, quality, and old-fashioned customer service, we offer lifetime warranties for our work, and every vehicle serviced by All-Star Collision is washed, detailed, the headlights polished, fluids are checked and topped off, safety checked, and returned in showroom condition. We offer free estimates, are approved by major insurance companies, and accept all claims for all cars and trucks. We use computerized frame straightening to factory specifications, offer fiberglass body repair and paint, free local pickup and delivery, and after-hours towing. Mention this radio program at drop-off and receive $100 off or a free rental car for up to 5 days during your repair. Visit us at allstarci.com or at 522 Railroad Street in Corona. Call us at 951-279-9161. We are the kings of wreck and roll.
Don't miss this month's Banning Beaumont Cherry Valley Tea Party meeting. Author and Hemet native Kurt Nordahl will be our featured speaker. His book, What Pisses Me Off About the Good Old USA, is a wake-up call for Americans who are sick of political correctness. And Douglas v. Gibbs will continue with our 4th session on our Constitution. That's Thursday, September 8th at 5 p.m. at the Farms House Restaurant in Banning.
Hi, this is Ed Hoffman, President Wholesale Capital Corporation, your direct mortgage lender. Real estate prices are still low, which means now's the time to buy your next home before they go up. Whether it's a home to live in, a vacation house, or an investment property, we can meet your mortgage financing needs to help you realize the next phase of your American dream. At Wholesale Capital Corporation, we make sure you get a loan that you can afford with terms that work for you. Wholesale Capital welcomes FHA buyers, conventional buyers, jumbo loan buyers, and we proudly help the U.S. military veterans take advantage of the zero down payment VA loan program. Nobody treats veterans better than Wholesale Capital Corporation. Seniors, if you're interested in creating an additional stream of income or just making your mortgage payment go away with a reverse mortgage, Wholesale Capital would love to help you. To speak with a loan officer who has your best interests in mind, call Wholesale Capital at 855-640-2020. That's area code 855-640-2020. Wholesale Capital Corporation, where we can close.
And now, back to our program.
Welcome back, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, right here on KMET 1490 AM. I have Alex Ferguson right next to me in the studio. Here is, we talked about story number 4 earlier, the real Kaepernick. Story number 3, dead on the launch pad. Did you hear about this, the explosion of the SpaceX? Elon Musk.
It's been a long time since we've had an explosion on the launch pad.
Yeah, well, this is, remember, NASA has, you know what's fascinating? I was reading a book by Robert Heinlein, and in the book it says, and this is a book written back in the 60s, and it predicts that the United States will abandon NASA, and abandon space programs in 2012. That's what the book says. I said, you know what? It's pretty darn close. But anyway, so
did he mention that the role was going to be changed to liaison to the Muslim community?
No, that he didn't predict. But it is going to private interest, and Elon Musk's SpaceX was fueling its unmanned rocket when a blast occurred last Thursday. Company was preparing for test firing, considered routine, in advance of a planned Saturday launch from Cape Canaveral. And the explosion destroyed the rocket and its payload, an Israeli satellite, $150 million satellite for Facebook, so that they could use it to direct beam internet into into Africa. And that was the idea here. Now,
so that might be a motivation for some.
Well, let's think about this for a second. Elon Musk, fairly libertarian, explodes very liberal left Mark Zuckerberg's satellite. Well, I don't know. That's a lot of money to lose. But then again,
thank God there were no lives lost.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So that's what happened with that. Now, next story number 2. He's giving you some news here, basically, is what we're doing. Globalism on the run. G20 starts Sunday, tomorrow, the 4th through the 5th. Just south of Shanghai, China. Their number one concern, the rising anti-globalism feelings in the world. Oh, by the way, Nigel Farage, the guy who was behind the Brexit vote, the conservative guy who was trying to get Britain out of the, he's stumping for Trump.
Oh, good, because what's his name, yeah. Kissinger and
Soros and all those guys are on this.
Kissinger and that Nixon guy, they're saying they're going to vote for Hillary, and I say those people are evil.
Well, Trump has established himself as the anti-establishment candidate. He's outside. You ever seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
Oh yeah.
I hadn't seen it in a while, and I watched it last week again after not seeing it for a long time. I mean, I'm crying by the end because I love this country so much. Such a good movie. But I feel like Trump is sort of like Mr. Smith. Not that he's the bumbling I don't know, farmer boy or whatever, but that. I mean, he's this billionaire, but that he's outside the system.
He's got a little bumbling farmer boy in him.
Well, yeah, I suppose so. But he's outside the system. Now, once again, I early on, I was not a huge fan of Trump's per se. And I'm not necessarily saying, oh, I love the guy. But, he is outside the system. And that's what has these bureaucrats and these establishment guys so nervous. Because he doesn't care about the system. They can't buy him. They can't control him. And that scares the you-know-what out of him.
In God's infinite wisdom, he may have chosen just the guy we need.
Well, I want to say this. I was at American Freedom Alliance event out in Westwood, Beverly Hills area a couple weeks ago. And an old friend of mine that I bumped into there, Pamela Geller, she says, Trump insulted me, or I can't remember what it was. He attacked her or something, said something, and he's never apologized, she says, and I like it. He doesn't apologize. She says, he's exactly what we need. What we need is a brass-knuckles fighter, and he's a brass-knuckles fighter. And I thought that was a fascinating description, a brass-knuckles fighter.
Especially when you take into I remember the name. It's George Shultz and Henry Kissinger are saying they're going to vote for Hillary, which means that the establishment is sick. It's evil, and we got to get rid of it.
Well, they're scared to death of someone like Trump. They absolutely. Okay, story number 1. This is the one I've been wanting to get to. We got a little time here. You want to talk about the fox guarding the hen house? There is word that because of all of the cyber attacks and threat of fraud in this election, the 2016 presidential election has become a national security matter. As such, the Department of Homeland Security has been considering declaring the election a critical infrastructure, which would then have them transfer control over security to them. Now think about this a moment. The executive branch, in a highly contested race, having one of its departments grab control of the election, despite the Constitution explicitly placing the manner and procedures of the election in the hands of the state legislatures and Congress when necessary.
The people I'm afraid will mess with the system is the administration. They're the ones that are the threat.
This is the same excuse that the federal government used, the executive branch used to grab hold of our electrical grid and our banking system. And it's none of their business, internal. And when I came across this is what came to mind. Now, I'm going to hand it over to you in a sec. Here's what came to mind. You heard of Joseph Stalin, the Soviet communist dictator? Here's his quote. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything.
Oh, that's an excellent quote. Very, very good.
That's what came to mind.
That's perfect.
I mean, we've got an executive branch who's definitely in the, in the tank for Hillary Clinton and for the Democrat Party, and they're saying, "Oh, we're going to have to take over this election, take control of it." Really? Do we? It's bad enough that 70% of the states use some kind of electronic election voting procedures, machines, which can easily be hacked. I want it to be all paper, personally, because there you have an accurate paper trail. But now on top of that, Homeland Security, which is part of the executive branch, which is under Obama, is saying they want to grab the reins of this election.
Yeah, but you got to remember that we have a protective barrier there that in order to vote, you have to have a picture ID. Wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. The liberals decided we can't ask for a
you're right
ID.
about needing ID to vote, but that's only in union voting. You go to the union meetings to vote, you have to show ID. But for your elective officials, no.
Well, the union goons couldn't lean on the opposition without that provision.
Well, like a friend of mine said, he said, my grandfather voted Republican his entire life, and then after he passed away, he began to vote Democrat. So, there you go. But I mean, we might as well, become a banana republic or a dictatorship. If Homeland Security grabs the reins of our elections, I mean, then it would be the leftist statist establishment counting the votes. I mean, remember, the Democrats think that the federal government is not at the helm. If the federal government's not at the helm with everything, nothing will ever get done, right? I mean, it's just, only the federal government makes things happen. Otherwise, it'll just never happen. It'll never go right because only the federal government can, do anything.
Pesky Congress.
Remember, Obama said, hey, you didn't build that business. If it wasn't for the federal government building the roads, I mean, nobody's capable of anything unless the federal government is there to, hold your hand and hold your leash.
Government abbreviated as GOD. I just thought of that one. Thank you very much. The applause is coming in momentarily.
Well, all I know is you've got people like, the White House, saying the federal government has a responsibility to strengthen the security resilience of its own critical infrastructure for the continuity of national essential functions, to organize itself, to partner effectively. Well, in other words, if the federal government don't do it, it won't happen.
Which is just quoting Obama.
Oh, well, Johnson, the head of Homeland Security, was complaining that there's some 9,000 jurisdictions. There's no one federal election system.
Which is the point.
Exactly.
You can't corrupt them all at once.
All right, well, we are running up against the clock now, but that was story number one. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Real quick, final words before I have you plug yourself.
Okay, I got a cartoon here I was going to read. But you can find it on my website, strangely enough. It's conservativecannonade.org. And I'm telling you, the depth and breadth of wisdom in that website is just well worth any time and effort you can put into getting to it.
And I am your host, Douglas V. Gibbs, douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. God bless America, and God bless you, my friends. And never forget, united we stand, combined we kick butt. We'll see you next week right here on KMET, likely from a Second Amendment Day event. We'll see how that works out. We'll see you then. In the meantime, stay safe, stay constitutional.